For God knows the day you eat from it, your eyes will open. Well, what does that mean? Now, obviously, their physical eye was already open. They could see the things around them, right? But what that means is that the way that they're going to perceive and the way that they're going to interact and the way that they're going to engage themselves in the world around them will change forever. The scripture says that at the end of verse 2, they were naked and unashamed. Why? Because they had not introduced this idea of lust into the picture. They didn't see each other from a standpoint, man, of just trying to lust after one another. They saw each other from God's perspective, that a man was born, had a desire for a wife. God allowed him to name all the animals, and in the process of naming the animals, Adam comes to the realization, I'm alone. God then says to Adam, it's not good for you to be alone. The desire of Adam's heart was to not be alone. God then gets rid of his loneliness by giving him woman, woman of his own flesh. There was no lust, there was no lasciviousness in that, there was none of that. There was a joy. When he wakes up, he sees her. He goes, whoa, what a magnificent creature. He now engages with her. He now, man, has this comfort of her. He now has this person who will understand him, who will compliment him, who will supplement him, someone he can compliment, someone he can supplement. And so therefore, they were naked but not ashamed. But after having violated God's directive, having eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, their eyes would be open. And so Satan says, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And what you will find here is how now understanding good and evil all of a sudden handicaps her reasoning, causes her to set thoughts and goals beyond her real capabilities. You'll see this here. Look at what happens next in verse 6. When the woman saw that the tree produced fruit, now this is her thinking. The tree produced fruit that was good for food. It was attractive to the eyes. It was desirable for making one wise. Think about it when they decided that they were going to, when our nation's politicians and policymakers decided that they were going to make cannabis legal. See, everything that they told us about it was, it's good for medical reasons. It helps to take away the pain from the old people. They don't have to deal with that, right? If you got glaucoma, it's going to help you with your glaucoma. Right? You got all of these things that they've listed that cause us to say, okay, I'll grab a hold to it. Now, remember, and we talked about this before, remember, if you lived as long as I have, you can remember when they told you all of the terrible symptoms of the marijuana, of the cannabis. That's why they was trying to kill the plant, because it sucks all the nutrients out of everything that it's a part of. But when NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, founded by Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy magazine, when he pushed to get marijuana legalized or at least decriminalized, they went after all of this. So just in the same way that Eve has now in her mind put together a list of reasons why I should violate God's directive. Because surely if it's good for food, of course he said don't eat it. Surely it's attractive to the eye. Well, it never was a rotten fruit. So if it was in the orchard, it was attractive to the eye. All of the fruit in the garden were attractive to the eye. And it was desirable for making one wise. This wisdom is a divine understanding. And so now she wants to have God's knowledge. She wants to be in God's place. She wants to replace what she knows with what he knows so that she can continue on in this line of discussion where she's removed Lord and can place herself in the position of lordship. Was attractive to the eye and desirable for making one wise. She took some of its fruit and ate it. She also gave some of it to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Now, I know I've been using a lot of she, because that's what the Bible was saying, is she. Right? But now we get a flip on the script. She also gave some of it to her husband who was with her and ate it. You see, when you're reading the scripture doesn't tell us at any time that he wasn't with her. It doesn't tell us any time that she had to go off and find him somewhere off. It says that she ate it and she gave it to him. Whether you're reading the King James Version or reading the various versions, right? Now look, see, this is where we start having she also gave some of it to her husband. This is why we know that by design, misery enjoys company. See, Satan had already decided that he wasn't going to follow the way of God. He wasn't going to have Jehovah be his Lord. He wanted to do his own thing his own way. He already knew that he could not win that battle. So what does he decide to do? He decides to take as many of the precious creations that God has created, who has he given actually power, more power than he had given the angels. He actually decides now, I'm going to take some of them with me. I'm going to break his heart. I ain't going to be able to defeat him ultimately, but I'm going to hurt him. I want to break his heart. And so misery now sought out company. And he found some company in Eve. And he used Eve to go ahead and draw in Adam. Pump your brakes. See, God holds everybody individually accountable. I can remember once my mother she made a very good strawberry cake, and she would always make one for the house and one for the church. And there are 5 boys and 1 girl in our house, so the one that was for the house was eaten immediately. The one for the church, we typically left alone unless we could convince somebody else to eat some of it first. And so we had got our little brother and convinced him that he ought to eat some of that cake. And when he ate the cake, we took that to mean it was now open game. And so we ate. So when Mom came home, then our story was, well, he ate. He was the one that ate the cake. But she flipped the script. I never even talked to him. You knew better, but you wouldn't do better. You can't blame it on him. He going to have to take his, and you going to have to take yours. You see, oftentimes God has given us exactly what he expects for us to do. But we want to find a way out that's not God-given. So we play the blame game. Now, the way that the scripture reads, she says, at the last line in verse 6, and says, she also gave some of it to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. He should have been preceding her. He should have interjected, don't touch it. Don't worry about what he's talking about. Why? Because he walked with God alone. He had time with God alone. God had established him as the head alone. God said, I will give you the desire of your heart because you're doing what I want you to do, when I want you to do it, how I want you to do it. He gave that woman, and he said, provide. That was to provide wisdom, to provide spiritual wisdom, as well as to provide earthly wisdom. It was not his to abdicate. He violated God's will. He did other than what God would have him to do. He surrendered God's truth for his life. He gave it over to his wife, and then his wife gave back to him, and he took it. This is why we have to get in a position that allow us to lead our families spiritually, to lead our families in such a way that we understand what God would have us to do, the way he would have us to do it. Let us presume that her intention was not a bad intention. Let us just presume that she was curious about getting some wisdom, getting some knowledge, getting some understanding, wanting to do something, wanting to be an individual, wanting to step out on her own. Let us presume that. So let us not presume that it was all about a bad thing. But that's why God had placed him there, so that he could inform her that we don't do that. Pump your brakes. We don't listen to that foolishness, and we don't participate in that foolishness. Pump your brakes. But when we're absent, when we step back, when we abdicate, when we give that authority to them, we find ourselves in a very similar kind of situation. And you know what? God holds us accountable. That's why he went to the garden. When all of this is done and you continue to read on, he's going to say, where are you? And then they said, we were hiding. The first person he spoke to was Adam. He didn't speak to Eve. He went right to Adam. What's going on? He then tried to blame the woman. That woman you gave, see, blame God and the woman. The woman you gave me. Right? Then look at what God does. She got to deal with her stuff, and he got to deal with his. We don't get to do wrong and do wickedness and do other, or get to do disobedience without God correcting us. That's what most of us want. We want to find some way to be disobedient to the will of God and then have God show mercy towards us by not holding us accountable for what we did that was out of his order.